This is a Flying Cow production.
There was a man named Worrell, Ernest Worrell. Let's celebrate this champion.
Well, hello and welcome back to Around the Worrell, our Patreon exclusive podcast where we talk all about the films of Ernest P. Worrell. That's right. And I, of course, you're a patron, so you would know this, but my name is Clay Johnson, the Flying Cow himself, and here with me today is the litigator, Lauren Collins. Lauren, how are you today, sir?
Doing pretty good. How you doing today, Clay?
I'm doing all right, I'm excited to be in here and talking to you about this movie, which I had not seen before getting ready for this podcast. Had you seen this movie?
I had actually. I learned about it for the first time sometime during the pandemic.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
And
learned about it only like a couple of years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is about the same time I did. But when I heard about it, I sought it out on one of the Tubi or wherever it was.
Right. Yeah.
And I put it on. It mostly, however, that previous time I watched it just played in the background. I didn't let it hold my attention very well.
Sure.
So it played from beginning to end, but this is the first time I really gave it my attention.
Sure.
As I let it play.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't actually said it. It's it's on the podcast feed, but just so everybody knows, we are today talking about Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. This is the first feature film. Was it in theaters?
It was in
Lauren,
theaters.
It was?
It was in theaters.
Okay.
According to Justin Lloyd's biography of
Sure.
Barney, it appears that it might have only gotten a regional release.
Sure, and that makes sense.
Yes.
Sure.
So they put it in theaters in the South and in the Midwest, because that's where the Ernest commercials have been running for the most part.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
of 85 at least.
Right. That's where he would have had the largest concentration of fans.
Exactly. And be honest, at that point, I'm not sure if he had like the Mellow Yellow ads that were national. So
Sure.
that's where his fan base was. And the plan was that if it did well in those markets, then to expand it out to a national release.
Sure.
And that didn't happen.
I mean, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about the film and how we felt about it in a second, but I do just want to mention, so Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam is from 1985. It is a science fiction comedy film, of course, starring Jim Varney. It was directed and written by John Cherry. And let's see, there's no mention of music or a composer on this. So, but yeah, and it also, and I just have to mention this because if you pay attention to the opening screen, it's dedicated to Elmo Williams, who is apparently a famed editor. I guess John Cherry and Jerry Carden knew him, or somebody from the production knew him. And the reason I bring this up is because at the end there is specifically an apology to Elmo Williams for the film, basically saying that if we make another, we'll make it up to you. And I'm just like, wow, did they already have an idea of, just kind of, because, we'll talk a bit more about it, but the film's a little all over the place.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, number one, I was surprised because often a dedication is to someone who just passed or something like that. At least in films. Obviously in books they dedicate to wives and mothers and all sorts of people who are currently living, but very often in films, if it's dedicated, it's usually dedicated to the memory of. So just to find out not only that Elmo Williams was alive, in fact, he lived into the 2000s.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I believe he didn't pass until he lived until 2015.
Oh.
So not only was he still alive, but they also were pretty sure he was gonna be disappointed. Which it's just like really managing expectations there, guys. Yeah, it's like on one hand, it's like, wow, you already, but at the same time, it's like, well, at least they're aware. The awareness, I think, is kind of admirable.
Yeah. It helps to set their own expectations, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I will say, according to the Wikipedia page, it says specifically if they made another Dr. Otto film. I don't know if that was, did you find anything in your research? Were they planning to make more specifically Dr. Otto films? Or was this just because obviously the films that Varney made later on were specifically Ernest films?
Yes.
And I don't know if they had intended to do, maybe more outside of the box stuff until they realized that this wasn't going to be a commercial success, and then went to Ernest because they thought it was more likely to garner an audience. Or if they were just like, we just wanted to do this idea, work out or don't, we're going to try to make more films in general.
Yeah, I didn't come across anything mentioning, and I didn't do a huge deep dive into this. Like again, being a regional release, I don't think there are a ton of news articles that are online these days. But I came across a couple. I didn't see any particular mention of plans for specifically a Dr. Otto sequel.
Right.
I suppose, obviously, we'll get to it
honestly,
later.
we will. I keep saying we'll talk about it later, but the film does not seem set up as a series.
No. I mean, it leaves it at the end open enough that
it's a little open-ended, but I don't really think that it's open in the way of we're leaving it open because we want to tell more stories here. I think it's more open in the way of, yeah, they stopped it, but they didn't really change anything. We'll talk, but yeah, it's interesting. So I mean, like I said, I don't know if that's just the Wikipedia editor taking some liberties, assuming that it was supposed to be on another Dr. Otto film. But I mean, obviously, especially some of the earlier Ernest films did much better. So I don't remember if any of the rest of them are dedicated to Elmo Williams. But I think he might have appreciated some of those a little more.
Yeah, a little more.
But yeah, you know what? Let's go ahead and let's jump into this film. Like I said, Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. Both of us only found out about this recently. This is not a film that is talked about a lot. I will say the way I found out about it is, a podcast that I listen to quite frequently. The guys from the critically acclaimed network, William Bibiani and Whitney Seibold. Whitney Seibold had actually watched all of the Ernest films and films containing Ernest, which included this one, of course. And that's where I, first heard about it because he mentioned it on that podcast. And honestly, I think had a lot of very similar takes to what I did. But I will say, one of the first things that I noticed here, and I don't think that this is the same in especially a lot of the earlier Ernest films, But I will say I did notice this. It looks like the name of a production company. It's definitely at the beginning of the family album. And I don't know if it would have been at the beginning of, I don't think it was at the beginning of the commercials, the greatest hits, but basically the Know What I Mean home video logo. Did you look into this at all? Was
no, I
like
didn't
an
clock that at
attempt
all.
at a production company? Because I don't, I mean, it's not really, I mean, number one, it is specifically a home video label, which, you know, all of the early Ernest films went, you know, had a much more successful theatrical release.
Sure.
And I even think by the time they went straight to home video, I don't think they had this. Again, I haven't seen a lot of them, but I don't remember seeing the Know What I Mean home video label on the. I mean, obviously we'll find out as we go, but
sure. I didn't prepare for the later movies for today, but
of course not.
Seeing that, am I correct in thinking that like Disney distributed Ernest Goes to Camp and maybe a couple of the later
through their Touchstone label, yeah. The first 4 Ernest films, yeah.
So it strikes me that might have played a difference in their home video release.
Absolutely, yeah.
According to Wikipedia, the original VHS release of Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam didn't happen until 1991. I'm sorry, 92. So that was
okay.
Yeah, 92. It's a good 7 years after this. In fact, that would have been after Ernest Scared Stupid coming.
Yeah, I was about to say that would have been the year after Ernest Scared Stupid.
And it says it came out from Good Times Home Video then. And then in 2007 it came out on DVD. But I'm honestly surprised seeing that it didn't have at least a limited VHS release sometime after.
Earlier,
this is the kind of thing I think that might have actually made back some of its money on VHS.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, again, we're gonna get into the specifics of the film, but I think a lot of what hurt this film as far as people watching it theatrically or, you know, even in home video is that it's not specifically an Ernest film.
No.
And that is what you know, was known of Jim Varney, was specifically the Ernest films. In fact, I will say in some of the posters for Dr. Otto, you know, a lot of them, it's specifically Dr. Otto and it's, you know, all about him. But there are some that use Ernest stills basically as the main image. I think just to try to draw eyes, because I think they realized that was, you know, part of the issue is that people didn't realize that it was Jim Varney. And even if they did, they didn't correlate it to Ernest. And, you know, Ernest was who they wanted. Ernest was the one that had gotten, you know, national notoriety, not necessarily Jim Varney yet at that time.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think it was necessarily unreasonable for audiences if they were going in with that expectation, because it wasn't just the posters. When I did a little bit of searching, the newspaper ads that ran at the time, you know, alongside listings in the living section of whatever newspapers, the ads often featured Ernest. Like with a strip of film.
That's the poster that's on the Wikipedia page.
It's on the Wikipedia page. Yeah. Not only that, but as a matter of coincidence, we can link to this in the notes. Just last week on YouTube, someone uploaded a theatrical trailer for Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. And that trailer just features Ernest P. Worrell. You know, it has a title card there near the end and a voiceover. Other than that, it's Ernest, the character of Ernest P. Worrell, talking about the movie to Vern.
Are these promotional things that were published at the time of the film's release in '85, or were some of these post?
I imagine it was probably at the time of the release of the,
Okay.
in theaters, and not
Sure.
like in '92 for the VHS release.
Right.
Again, what you see in the trailer is Ernest looking at film, that would run
Right.
through the wheel,
Right.
and telling people, what to expect.
Right.
So he's kind of describing the film, but again, this isn't even the clip from the Ernest clip from the beginning of the film. It's just
Right.
Ernest footage.
Right.
And it basically gives no sense of what the actual movie's going to be.
Yeah, you can tell with these early projects, because you have Family Album that came out in what was it, 83?
Oh, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And this one in 85, and it wasn't until Camp comes out in 87 that they fully embraced, we're just gonna do Ernest in the films.
Mhm.
I wonder if this was, urging from Jim basically being like, I want to do Ernest, but I want to also do other things, give me the opportunity to play other characters. Maybe it was his urging to not lead with just doing Ernest films. Maybe he was the one that wanted to do the Dr. Otto and the, branch out with more characters in the Family Album and things like that. Because both of these, they are definitely going, obviously in Family Album, they're using a lot of the same backgrounds that you would be familiar with in the commercials.
Mhm.
But Dr. Otto is a completely, with the exception of the beginning and the end, Ernest is not in this at all.
Nope.
And there's very little for Ernest fans really to latch onto unless you just like the character of Dr. Otto, or some of, obviously there's some, like Aunt Nelda is
Yes.
in here. And I will say though, less of the other characters that are in this are traditional Ernest characters that you will see throughout the rest of the films. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I will say to that point, I think in terms of what might attract people to this film who like the other Ernest films,
Yeah.
obviously the other films and the TV show all had Jim Varney playing the other characters. If that's what you like
Right.
seeing Jim Varney do, this film offers plenty of that.
Yeah, and honestly, I will say, I think the strongest thing about this film is Jim's performance, is Dr. Otto, honestly. I think that there are a lot of things in this film that I actually really admire. And top of that list is Jim Varney's performance as Dr. Otto. I think that this character is so over the top, and you can tell he is having basically Dr. Otto is a villain from old school serials.
Yes.
I wrote down, I was like, oh, like at the beginning, it very much feels like he's playing like his own version of Ming the Merciless, or even, for something a little bit more relevant to the day, a little bit like Skeletor.
Yeah. He's certainly decked out like a Ming type character.
Yes, definitely. Now, the rest of the film falls down in that, Flash Gordon sense. But I do think that, like I said, he's definitely the highlight here. And there's some very interesting and I think fun decisions that are made. It's just the question is, do they all come together the way that they should? But
I think, like you said, he's the best. Jim's the best part of this film.
Yeah.
He also, I think he deploys his characters better in this film. I've at least found it more enjoyable watching these characters than in Family Album, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In Family Album, it was a little bit more, you could tell that they learned something from Family Album. It was a little bit more all over the place, little more disheveled, less organized. This one, the beginning of the film is basically Ernest telling Vern which this is the only time we really get Vern in the film.
Yep.
In the introduction, that basically he bought this machine off of a guy, and he was like, it was a steal. All I had to do was sell my car and, give up my first child and all this kind of, just being silly Ernest. But it's a transformation machine, which I wrote down. I was like, this is the perfect device to write into a film, because, as good as Jim Varney is at Ernest, I don't feel like he was ever satisfied just playing Ernest. I think he felt like he needed to be able to throw in those. He was very much a character actor, and he never wanted to be just one character.
Yeah, no, harkening back to what you said a minute ago, I imagine Jim's desire to play something other than Ernest did play into, the development of this film.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, just to add to that, the other thing I suspect played into this, into the decision to do this rather than an Ernest film, out of the gate, is I got the feeling, maybe from some previous interview I watched from Jim back in the 80s, it's in my head at least, that early on, that they may not have thought that Ernest as a character could support a film.
Sure, because he'd only been in commercials up to that point, which were,
in 30
at
seconds,
most 30 seconds to a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in things like Family Album, like he's still not playing Ernest the entire. He's doing little interstitial bits for maybe a minute or two of Ernest, and then throwing it to another character.
Right.
And so I imagine it's first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is years ago when there was talk about spinning Chester the Cheetah into a TV series based on like a Cheetos mascot.
Sure.
There might have been the thought early on of, can we turn, is it even possible to turn Ernest Hewlett into a leading character in a film? Is there there?
Honestly, I understand their hesitation. I will say, though, and we mentioned this last time, there is precedence for, other things trying to turn spokesmen into television entities or film entities and things like that. The difference between them and Ernest is just the amount of sheer volume that he had. Yes, a lot of it wasn't very long, but he was already fine-tuning shtick that would eventually be employed brilliantly in the films. Now, I think the big question is he going to work as an emotional character? Is he going to work as a character that, can be sad, can play levels? And I think, obviously we'll talk more about that as we get into the films. So I understand their hesitation, but I also think that we already had so much character built on Ernest. While it was still one-dimensional, it was still a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah, so it's certainly more than you get from your typical spokesman. Absolutely.
Right.
The other thing I think that might have played into their initial caution and hesitation is the way that Ernest's shtick in not just the commercials, but again, Family Album and everything else beforehand is breaking the fourth wall and talking to the camera. Like if you're going to make an Ernest film, do you have him do that the entire time, or do you just have him be just a character in a film? And if it's going to be the latter, which makes more sense, then how do you then pull Vern out of it? How well is Ernest going to work if he's not, again, breaking the fourth wall?
Sure. And I will say, obviously, the scene in the beginning, they specifically had.
That's exactly what he's doing. And it's exactly how he ends the film.
And I will say the scene at the end where he comes back was weaker, but I don't think that was his fault. No. We're going to talk. But let's go ahead and continue talking about the film, because like I said, Ernest steps into a transformation machine, and then basically
that's what they call it, a changing coffin.
Yes, a changing coffin, because it is employed several times after. And I will say, the interesting thing about the changing coffin is that at the beginning of the film, Ernest gets into it, and it almost seems like they're setting that up as this is now how we got Dr. Otto.
Mhm.
But Dr. Otto has his own backstory and childhood and everything like that.
And its own lair. Like, it's clearly not in Ernest's, garage.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And also, when he uses the changing coffin later, he seems still Dr. Otto, just different.
Yeah.
It looks different, but he's still, in as far as mentally, he's still Dr. Otto. So it's like, okay, is the film telling us that Ernest actually is just a disguise of Dr. Otto? Like, what? I mean, because that's how it seems at the end of the film. I'm just going to say that. That's 100% how it seems at the end of this film.
Well, at least, but the end of the film, to be honest, it does more to imply that it's still Dr. Otto just posing as Ernest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. It does. Honestly, I get why they did it at the beginning of the film to tie in that recognizable, because I might be wrong, but I feel like that scene was tacked on at the beginning to give the Ernest fans something to latch on to.
That wouldn't surprise me. That feels very right. And also, I don't know where you watch the film, but in most of the streaming versions of this that are online, that intro isn't there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The movie starts with the credits.
Okay.
Specifically, I watched it on Tubi.
Okay, and it's not there.
No, I knew that it existed, so I had to search it out and watched it on YouTube myself.
Yeah, I actually had a digital copy of this that I'd had for a while, just hadn't had the time to watch it. The problem with that was that it wasn't the best quality. And one of the biggest issues in this film, and you can tell that they're new at making films, the lighting in this is atrocious.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the Dr. Otto stuff, it was really hard to make out who was who and what was going on. So I had to switch to a higher quality version. I mean, it's still low quality, the ones on streaming on Tubi, but much better than the version that I had. So my version had that intro. I didn't even think about. I will say though, the timing was off, and that's probably why.
Oh, like the audio from the video?
No. The timing of when I paused my version and went to the Tubi version, I went to the time code, the same time code, and it was wrong. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Yeah.
Yep. That would be why. Yeah. Yeah. No. I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something. Now
You're fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically Dr. Otto is set up as, the best of supervillains. There's shades of Bond villains in here. But like I said, it's so campy. It feels like a serial villain, a comic book villain, just, the look of Dr. Otto alone is just, I love the look of this character. I really do wish that Varney had done more with this character. We will see him again in the television show, but I just love my favorite thing, this.
Yeah.
The head hand, absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
And there is a guy specifically credited as Dr. Otto's head hand, and it's Glenn Patach, or Patak, I'm not sure which one, but absolutely phenomenal. This man deserves a medal, because it's not like he's just sitting there on his head. No. He reacts when Dr. Otto left. We get the movement of the hand. It is, and it's constant. I gotta say that had to be the weirdest thing, because he's he's just stroking his head the whole time, and doing kind of thing. That the hand is never sitting idle. I will say, next to probably it from Addams Family. I think this is probably some of the best hand acting
Hand
I've
acting.
ever seen. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
No, it's a nice touch, and I do love the fact that there's a separate credit for Mr. Patak.
It's great.
Yeah,
It's
I think it
absolutely
does say he was
great.
a writer on this film as well. So
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
how-
yeah. I figured it had to be somebody from the crew
Yeah.
or something like that. Not specifically a hand actor.
Yeah. And I do love the fact that at least on IMDb he is like second build. I don't know if that's how he was at the end of the film or not. I didn't.
Yeah, no, I mean it's on Wikipedia. I mean, I think part of it is because it only makes sense to
Yeah.
if you're going to credit him right after Dr. Otto, just so it just kind of makes sense. But yeah, no, I think that is absolutely a great decision.
Yeah.
But we find out about his plan. Basically, he has Dr. Otto has this machine. Excuse me. He has this machine that is designed basically to mess with the money of the world. And I will say that the film is very tongue-in-cheek, it's very silly, but it's also, at least in tone, feels very satirical because it's taking on a lot of themes and ideas. I mean, it's straight up, talking about, the financial system and capitalism and, a lot of other things that are going to come into the play in a second with the hero of the film.
Frankly, Dr. Otto's big plan had echoes to me of Fight Club.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But in obviously that film is much darker, much more,
much later.
Yeah. And I will say that the way that it's handled here, I will say my biggest issue with this is that while I like a lot of the things that they're bringing up, and while I like the satirical tone that it's taking, I don't know what the film is actually trying to say about these things. And I think the biggest problem is that I'm not sure that the film knows what it's trying to say about these things.
No, it definitely did feel throughout that the film could have used at least a couple more passes on the script.
Yeah, a little bit more clear. Like I said, I think there's some great ideas here. I like the fact that they're kind of, tackling capitalism. And you would think, oh, okay, the villain's attacking capitalism. This is a pro-capitalism film. But then you bring in the quote, and I'm going to heavily quote, hero of the film, which was Lance Sterling, the all-American boy, played by Mike R. Mueller. And I do not think I can say strongly enough how much I hated this character. Like, and not like, oh, this is a dumb character. Why are they doing this? Not like, oh, he's playing him so bad. Or no, I think that the character was designed to not be at least someone that we're rooting for. I think this was it was supposed to be a quote hero. Now, I will say, I don't know. I think the way that he's drawn, I think he's more supposed to be a buffoon hero or, a hero who doesn't realize, his shortcomings and things like that. I don't think that they realized how hateable he actually could be. And I think a lot of that is, this was made in 85.
Yeah.
It's now 2022. The things that this guy represents are now not just silly, they are harmful. Because this guy straight up represents, white, just I deserve everything, sexism. I mean, it's not blatantly stated, but I wouldn't put racism past him. Basically every negative ism is kind of embodied in this character. And even when he's even like this goody two shoes, like to an almost insidious level, like to a level that it's like, okay, he's taking this stance not because it's right, but because he feels like this makes him better than everyone, which really just made me hate him.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that they might have overshot a little bit on their goals to make him so hateable, but I think it was intentional, quite frankly, to make him not just a buffoon, but to make him an unlikable buffoon.
I was going to say, I do think that they intended to make him unlikable. I don't think they realized the levels of hateable that he could achieve.
Yeah. And that's partly because as much as they wanted to, on some level, paint him as being sort of a stereotypical all-American, where he wants to lead the family in the Pledge of Allegiance in the Christmas flashback, for instance, or
oh my God,
his science fair experiment is just about the value of voting.
Oh my, I cannot tell you how much. Number one, I wanted to hit him in those scenes.
Yeah,
but number two, I'm rooting for Dr. Otto right now. I don't know if I'm supposed to be rooting for Dr. Otto right now, but I am. In fact, there are a lot of points in this film where I was like, if it weren't for the fact that he was so cartoonishly over the top, I feel like this is a hero piece for Dr. Otto.
Yeah. No, the thing it kind of reminds me of in his characterization,
right?
And it's appropriate given the titular doctor villain of both pieces is Captain Hammer. In Dr. Horrible Sing-Along Blog.
Yeah.
Whereas, but in that the hero of the story, but no, the story is supposed to make you understand you're not supposed to like this guy. He's a reasonably terrible person.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think the difference in that though is that Dr. Horrible as the villain is also the straight man of the piece.
He is the protagonist more than Dr. Otto is. That is true. Yeah.
Exactly. Even though, again, as I said, Dr. Otto is the more enjoyable. He's also the less morally reprehensible, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I know that the things he's saying sound horrible, but I don't feel like I want to punch him in the face the way I do Lance Sterling.
No, the feeling I kept getting throughout the entire thing, and I want to assume this is what they were kind of shooting for, is that, by pairing him up with Doris, and then seeing how she is frequently right and he is frequently wrong.
Yeah, and
this mission would have gone a lot better if she had been the one in charge.
Right, and honestly, there have been other things that have used that kind of that device where there's a hero and there's a sidekick, and obviously the sidekick is the brains of the operation, but the hero's the one getting all the glory. The difference here that I found is I don't remember in those ever feeling like I thought the hero was a dick. I remember thinking, oh, he's just kind of doesn't realize that he's not as smart as he thinks he is, kind of thing.
You're sort of Inspector Gadget.
Yes, exactly. Inspector Gadget and Penny is a perfect example. She is, quote unquote, the sidekick. She's also the one that does all the work.
Every single time. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, yeah, I wondered if that's what they were going for, but again, this layered on just kind of self-importance, convinced of his own superiority. I felt like they were saying something here, but I never got the clear message of what they were trying to say with this. I'm like, are they actually saying they think capitalism is bad? Are they actually saying that they think that this guy spouting all of these American platitudes, yes, in the 80s, that actually would have been quite a statement, because that was during the big, America First boom, Reaganomics and all that crap. So it would have been kind of a salient point to be making, but I don't know that they ever actually like made it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not certain if that's what they were shooting for or not, but that is
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I think, like I said a minute ago, why the script could have used a couple more passes just
Yes.
to clean up these sort of character issues.
Yeah.
Like one that comes to mind is that there's the point where they have been tied up by the pirates.
Right.
And I think he's called the Dump comes to get them, and it turns out like Lance has a pre-existing relationship where he has helped the Dump, which seems perfectly sincere and nice of him. Like it's the most probably the most heroic bit he has in the film. It's in the past, but it comes back to help him now.
Right.
But,
yeah. There were things that didn't really track.
Yeah. And that would track if there was more of those kind of hints, like where Lance keeps getting out of binds because of things he had done in the past to be a nice guy, but that's not what happens in the rest of the film. This is the only
well, and honestly, I think this is the only time that a quote unquote nice or a character that's coming off as nice seems to like Lance.
Yes,
because he is employed by bankers from Cincinnati, which I love that they target Cincinnati first.
Oh, I wrote this down specifically. Dr. Otto says he has chosen to target Cincinnati.
He's like, obviously, Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, of course, the financial capital of Southern Ohio.
I'm just like, I mean, number one, Varney's from Kentucky. So that makes sense because depending on where you are in Kentucky, Cincinnati is like the biggest city around. So, it makes sense that that probably would have been a joke that he would have suggested, kind of thing. But yeah, I just thought that was great. But yeah, there aren't a lot of character because that was the one character that I was like, I actually kind of like this character of the Dump. I will say, I believe the Dump might have been a reference to a comics character, or I think it's comics, but a character of a similar look called the Heap that was also the inspiration for not only Swamp Thing, but Man Thing. Yeah.
So I could, I've heard of the Heap. Yeah, I forget what company that's from, but I could see that relationship there.
Because it definitely looks similar. And I mean, Heap, Dump, it's not a huge leap.
No, that's not. That actually would have to explain the name if that's the reason.
I will say my first thought when they said, when I saw it, was actually the trash heap from Fraggle Rock. Yeah. The trash heap has spoken.
I'll say, by the way, the financial capital of Southern Ohio sounds to me like a Freakazoid style joke.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's making something mundane sound important until you really pay attention to what they
that would be a master plan of the Lobe in one of those episodes. Is that he has to do exactly Dr. Otto's plan to Cincinnati.
Yes, absolutely. But I will say, when we mention the bankers, there is a bit that I want to mention because, they are basically trying to build up how big of a deal, Cincinnati's financial situation going down is. And, they're basically talking about, they're trying to set up, it's going to be the end of civilization. And they're just like, your typical, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, that kind of thing. But they go through this list of things and it's just like, oh, there'll be a collapse and blah, 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 running and crying in the streets. They specifically say a line. The streets will run red from the blood of stockbrokers' suicides. And I was like, what the fuck? Because the last thing they say, and it'll mess with the economy too. You know, it's like, and the worst thing is it'll mess with our money, basically. But yeah, I'm just like, wow, way to make this like dark.
Yeah.
Stockbroker suicide specifically. Like,
Yes.
whoa. I was just like, wow. I don't know if that line is brilliant or just like a stroke too far, but I loved
It's a good line. It's one of a lot of good lines in this, to be honest.
yeah, I was just
I also like
oh
the visual
God.
metaphor, by the way, of the rat traps to illustrate
yeah.
like why you know, other than doing dominoes, why affecting Cincinnati would be the downfall of like the international economy. It's
Well, because it's not like Dr. Otto just does Cincinnati and let it trickle.
yeah,
He then attacks all the other cities as well. You know, continuing to attack smaller cities later. I can't remember the name of the town that he attacks, but it's like some, you know, podunk town, and I'm just like, okay, we're specifically gonna attack.
Film could honestly use some chyrons now and again to let you know what city.
Well, I mean, he did say, I just can't remember. I will say during the attack on Cincinnati, we do get our first appearance in any of these movies from Bill Burge.
Yes.
He is the gas station attendant. For those who don't know the name Bill Burge, he also will play Bobby in several of the upcoming films. But this is his first appearance in any of the Carden and Cherry Varney-led films, playing a gas station attendant. And yeah, great scene. Great to see Bill Burge show up here.
Remind me, because it's been a while since I've seen the Ernest films before.
Right.
We revisit them soon. Did he ever talk much as Bobby, or was that a silent character?
I was about to say he spoke very little as Bobby, and I actually was like, I think this is the most I've ever heard him speak in any of these films, because he has like a line. He actually says the line, "I don't know what we'd do without credit cards."
Yep.
You know, yeah, and I was like, wow. He gets a whole line,
yeah,
not just a word or a letter or, you know, something like that. But yeah, no, I thought it was great to see him. But yeah, I did, you know, I will say I was not impressed with Lance in his first scene. Number one, his whole war, he's made up to look very yuppie-ish. They throw in the hat, I think, as an attempt to like mix an Indiana Jones type flavor in there, but it's a white or you know, it's a very pale looking hat. So I wrote down, I was like, I don't know if this guy's supposed to be important, but he doesn't pop at all.
It's not a fedora. No, it's not there to make
no.
It is a yuppie hat.
Yeah, it's but I mean, you know, the 80s weren't exactly the time of hats, at least not for men. And he wears the hat throughout the film.
Yeah. But he has
partially because you can tell he's balding in the back later on when he takes it off. But
yeah, he has the light hat. He has the scarf that he wears for much of the film.
He's got the sweater tied around. Well, that very preppy yuppie
as the film goes on, he loses parts of the outfit.
Sure.
Okay. Midway through, he has the sweater off and tied around his waist or whatever.
Okay.
Earlier on, he has the white, almost like Miami Vice jacket just over his shoulders. Like his sleeves, his arms aren't in the sleeves. It's just draped on him. And then with a scarf on top of it. I think he might lose the jacket around the pirate scene. To be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right. I honestly
he doesn't have it by the time he's climbing up the hill.
No, he does not.
Save the lady from the door.
Yeah.
None of this makes sense in context, obviously, as we're discussing it.
I honestly cannot tell you how many times I have written in my notes in different ways. I hate this guy. Lance is an ass. I want to punch him in the face. Like it was palpable.
Yeah.
I did not like this character.
I was surprised. I didn't have quite that reaction. I mean, I didn't like him, but I like I said earlier, I was like, I took this to be more of an intentional, characterization of him. I frankly went into this expecting to like Jim, obviously, but to be really, really underwhelmed by Lance. And no, I was at least satisfied with Lance.
Yeah, I mean, I think as performance-wise, I think that Mike Mueller did an admirable job.
Yeah,
because
he did what was called for.
It's not like I didn't feel anything about the character.
Yeah,
I did. Just I had a very negative reaction.
He engendered a reaction from you. That's
exactly.
That's what the important thing is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he was supposed to engender a negative reaction. Again, I don't think they realized, because 85 different than 2022. I don't think that character was problematic, but I don't think it was as toxic as it is now.
Yeah.
Because I definitely described him as toxic a couple of times. Like, just this guy to me is the embodiment of everything that is wrong with people. But continuing on, this is where we get basically the flashback scene. We see because apparently Lance and Dr. Otto were born in the same hospital on the same day, grew up in the same area,
went to the same high school.
Right. And I will say, I do love the fact that in all of the child scenes, both Dr. Otto and both
Jim and Mike play the younger
are played by the older versions of themselves. They did not cast kids as these characters, whereas I think they did have other kids in some of the other scenes.
They certainly did in the
in the science lab, at least younger, so I it just reminded me, have you ever listened to the podcast Dead Pilot Society?
No.
Okay. One of my absolute favorite, basically the idea of the show is they take pilots that never even got a script reading, much less filmed or on got on the air, basically gives them the table reading that they never got. And they play it on the podcast. One of my absolute favorites is a script that was written by John Hodgman, and it is called Only Child. And the whole point of that is it was basically about him as a kid, and the shtick was going to be that it was going to take place, with kid actors, except for him, he was going to play himself as a child, which I absolutely, just imagining it while listening to the podcast was absolutely hilarious. So I loved this concept. I loved the fact that they were doing it. I would have liked a little bit more juxtaposition, actually seeing younger children with them. I think that would have made it even funnier.
Yeah.
But I liked that they did this. This was really the beginning of my hatred for Lance, because his parents are detestable too. The whole, as you mentioned, can we please say the Pledge of Allegiance on Christmas? And I'm just like, oh my God, please somebody punch him in the face.
Love it. By the way, I there's a portrait of George Washington hanging over the mantle.
So insufferable.
I love it. I think it's fantastic.
I'm not saying it's not great for the character. It does more just to fuel my fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it's not just patriotism. Patriotism to these types of people is a weapon.
Yeah.
Which is why it makes me so angry. But yeah, we also see that Dr. Otto's parents didn't like him. I will say, according to the Wikipedia page, it describes his birth as a failed abortion attempt. And I was like, I don't think that that's the line they draw in the film. But that's a take.
I mean, that's not entirely inconsistent with what we.
I mean, yeah, it's not. It's never said explicitly, but it's also not debunked that because they do bring in basically a bag and say it survived.
Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. That's consistent with it. Also, the
dark.
fact that like, she seems almost surprised by there's a baby. Like thought this came from her, but like it doesn't even really give the appearance she's at a hospital when the baby is.
No, she's like in a lair.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah. Also, and later we see them in a shack. Like they clearly have a home.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why she was hanging out in this cave after this happened, but
obviously very different. But it reminded me a little bit of the Penguin's origin story in Batman Returns.
Little bit. I mean, obviously, yeah, they were well off, and these people are not.
But being horrified by their own child,
right? I mean, we do obviously see that Dr. Otto killed his own parents with a bomb on Christmas.
Yep.
And I will say this was the time that because I had issues with it all the way up until this, but this is when I wrote down the lighting here sucks because we see a shape that looks like Dr. Otto jumping for joy, but we can't see him. It's just black.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't remember them having issues with the lighting this much in the later films, so I'm feeling like they hired a guy after this. I mean, and it's really just the dark stuff that makes it look
just a lot of dark stuff in the lair and with Dr. Otto,
and I think I think they probably had a lighting guy, but I don't think they had a lighting guy specifically for night shoots, or knowing how to light for night.
I mean, it's a problem with like, again, this film costs less than $1 million. It's always going to be a problem shooting.
I mean, honestly, the majority of the Ernest films did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but this was like the book had said it was less than $1 million. I think Wikipedia says it was like 800,000.
Okay.
But regardless, like trying to shoot light outside at nighttime is difficult if you don't have a real budget. I actually saw a meme about this the other day to explain like why does night shoots always look worse in like indie films than in like Hollywood films, and it showed a shot from Nope. I think it was like where
I mean, I will say in Nope, I've actually heard people specifically say that in Nope, Jordan Peele was trying a new technique to make it like the best it's ever looked. So I don't think Nope is the best example here, because I've actually heard people say that Nope is extraordinary for their
well, to be honest, I can't imagine the norm. Based on the photo I saw, and then we'll move on, it is that there was basically a giant light hung over this house by a crane. Like just having this equipment there. I want to get stressed, like it's an actual physical house. There is like a light that must be 50 feet square.
Yeah.
Like just again, hanging above the house to give just sort of a low light outside, just like a full.
They also in Nope specifically shot day for night, but they did it in a way that it looked like you couldn't tell.
Yeah, that too. Those kind of things. I think they've done some. I've heard complaints about that for House of the Dragon lately too. That some of that.
I was about to say a lot of people shooting day for night can be an issue.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if maybe that was even an option on this film. Probably not. With because you do get the feeling, because I don't know. I feel like a lot of this was the same crew that they used for commercial shoots. So I don't know who had, feature experience, if anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we're all trying some new stuff here. Yeah. And, honestly, there are, talking about the budget specifically, there are a lot of places where I actually kind of like the low budget look to it. I love Dr. Otto's lair.
Yep.
I love, my God, I love the costuming in this. I mean, we talked a little bit about the head hand, but Dr. Otto's entire costume, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's basically like it's looks like metal, but it is like strings of metal, like looped all around to make this huge, like I don't even know the word, but
what you're describing, I'm going to say this because if it helps visualize it for anyone listening, that makes it sound a little bit like Doctor. I'm sorry, not Doctor. Mr. Sinister's cape from the X-Men.
Sure, but I mean, this is kind of a chess piece that goes.
It is a little, yeah. Dr. Otto's doesn't
around
that, but it has the big,
it's a little bit more
up towards the back.
But I mean that's phenomenal. The costumes of the his cronies are great.
Yep.
I mean there's one woman, one of his female assistants. I believe her character's name is Rhonda Sue.
Okay, yeah, there's Rhonda Sue.
And she's got one just regular like chest plate, it's kind of a bikini thing going on, but the other one is just an HVAC tube connected directly to her chest. And I'm just like, I know that this was a cost-cutting measure, but I love that. That is phenomenal.
Yeah. One of my favorite little costume bits from later in the film, it's during the Nelda scene. Is the robot is in disguise, so the robot is wearing glasses and a mustache and a toupee.
I love the robot because it is like it looks like the robot that you would make for your kid on Halloween. A little bit, but the head, it's literally just an upside down bucket with a yellow smiley face put on it. And I love that they change the smiley face sometimes based on his emotion. It's brilliant. Like I said, there are some things that I think this film does amazing. It just, to me, doesn't completely come together fully.
I think it comes to having watched it now and paid attention the full time. I again wish it had been polished up a little more. I was still surprised that thinking that it came together well enough that I'm a little surprised this never became more of a midnight film. You feel like this could have gotten a little bit of traction because there is some stuff to latch onto here. Yeah.
Again, Jim Varney's performance alone, I think, is enough to garner some interest.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's not going to ever draw like a loyal, repeat audience in the same way that like the Rocky Horror Picture Show will.
But that also was a film with something on its mind.
Yes,
and it did it successfully.
Yes.
This is a film that feels like it's got something on its mind just because in the way that it's staged. But I don't completely understand what they're getting at. And we don't need to go beat by beat through this. Basically, Sterling is after Otto. He meets Otto in several different disguises. And, Otto pretty much, wins every single time. Sterling just somehow escapes.
Lance doesn't. Lance doesn't win in the sense that like he defeats Otto. Otto doesn't win basically Lance escapes. That's all Lance manages to do any of these times, just not die.
But that brings me to the end, because in the end, the way that, again, Dr. Otto at this point actually kind of just escapes. He goes into the change coffin. And Lance hits a button that says the right choice, which, I mean, okay. there are two buttons. One's labeled the right choice, the other one's labeled the wrong choice. And
Yep.
he's like, "Oh, which one do I choose?" Okay. But he hits it. And the end of the film, they're still in a dystopian society.
Oh yeah, no, it's very clear that like money doesn't exist anymore.
No. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, I think Dr. Otto won.
Oh, Dr. Otto did.
I mean,
yeah, no, Dr. Otto absolutely won.
I wrote down, I don't want Lance to win.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did.
No.
He pressed the button that made it look like he won. But at the end of this film, he didn't save shit.
No, I mean,
He didn't fix anything.
frankly, even when he pushes the button,
I don't know what that actually does.
Well, it's not clear. Well, I mean, the visuals you then get basically are destruction. Like it's not. It's not really. It's not
I think it dismantled the machine, but the work had already been done.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no fixing it. There was no taking that back. And I mean, he didn't have the expertise to know how to do that anyway. No. I mean, we've mentioned Doris. I do want to mention Doris, played by Jackie Welch, who is a face that we will actually see a few times in this podcast, because she appeared in a few different Ernest films.
Yep.
But you know, I don't think even she had the I mean, she's definitely more capable than Lance. I mean, we get a great scene where apparently she destroyed the robot with her own hands.
Yes.
I mean, all we know is that the robot ran off chasing her, and then we come back and she's like all like looks like Amazon woman.
Yes.
You know, and is holding the head of the robot in her hand.
It's a great little return, but yeah, her hair is no longer pulled back. Her hair is wild. Her clothes are kind of ripped up.
Yes.
But where she looks, you know, yeah, she looks like she's been through quite an ordeal.
Right.
It's, to be honest, then a little confusing continuity wise that for the rest of the film she doesn't look like that.
I was about to say, because even after, I was expecting to see her in that wild look, and I was like, all of a sudden, because her hair's short throughout the film.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in that one scene, she's got this wild, crazy hair. And then the next time we see her, it's short again.
Yeah, literally the very next shot she's in is when she's running over to the, I think, the changing coffin, trying to work it, and then trying to save Rhonda Sue. And it looks just like she did earlier in the film.
Yeah.
It's almost like that one shot of her with the robot was just sort of a last minute addition.
Yeah, well, like not in the same continuity with the rest of the film almost.
No.
I mean, I loved it because I thought it was a great image.
It doesn't look like that for the rest of the scene.
Yeah,
I literally backed it up just to confirm that, like, did I miss something? Was that not? I thought that was Doris who came back with the robot. Was it not Doris?
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought too. I was like, wait,
no, Dr. Otto literally says it's Doris. So
yeah. He even like applauds her for taking out the machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, quote, heroes in this film are completely ineffectual.
Yeah.
And again, I feel like that's a statement.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the statement is.
It's another weakness in the script, to be honest, is that usually when you have those kind of relationships between like the incompetent lead and the much more competent like sidekick.
Right.
Doris is clearly more competent than Lance, but she's
still not. Yeah, this is still an assignment. I mean, honestly, this assignment is beyond anybody.
Yeah. I mean, when you have moments with her saying like, I think this might be a trap, but like it's still just sort of, she's still not entirely certain, not the position of like, this is absolutely a trap. Lance, you're a moron for doing this. It's like, and he just sort of overrules
her.
And
I mean, you know, if you want to look into it, that can actually be framed. Again, I don't know if it was the intention, but it can be framed as kind of the way that we treated women in society, that they were meant to, you know, basically just be around for the ride and to support their man, and not actually like be effectual. And in this, she's actually should be, again, ineffectual, but more effectual than Lance. She should be the lead of this.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could say that this is a statement the film is making. I don't know if that was 100% intentional. There is obviously some sexism expressed by Lance that is, I will say, none of those types of statements are ever put in the mouth of a character that is meant to, that we're meant to be behind. So I like that, you know, whereas in, you know, Family Album, there were some things that I was like, I don't know if we're supposed to be rooting for this character, but certainly you've turned me against them. I'm not sure what's going on here, but here, obviously, this was a character that we weren't supposed to be behind. So I liked the way that they did that, but again, I don't feel there are a lot of great pieces here, and you know, I wish that it, as strong as Varney's performance was and Dr. Otto as a character was, I think that almost too much attention was, I mean, honestly, I'm sure that probably Jim handled all of that himself. But I don't know how much he gave input to the rest of the film. I didn't actually look. Who's listed? I was about to say, I'm wondered who's listed as a writer. It's listed specifically as John Cherry and Cope Sams.
Yeah.
Which John Cherry was also the director. He was the director of the majority of the Ernest films. I think he only didn't direct one film, and that one was directed by Cope Sams, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, he's not listed as a writer, but I'm sure he had a lot of input, Jim Varney.
I imagine.
You know, specifically into his character and things like that. But
maybe helping to break the large points of the story.
Right. I mean, I wonder if maybe another voice on the rest of the story might have been helpful.
Yeah.
Because like I said, there's some great ideas here. They just don't come, they're not fully formed.
No. And that was one of my larger issues with the film, to be honest, is again, as much as I like individual little, beats, character performances, lines frequently, subtle sight gags and that sort of thing. Once again, like in Family Album, like in the later Ernest movies, much of the plot here is an excuse to give Jim a chance to play other characters. And in the film, I didn't think it did a real good job of explaining why Otto is doing that. Like he chooses to go into the changing coffin and to become, in order, if I remember, did I have all this in order here? He becomes Rudd Hardtack, sort of an Australian kind of Crocodile Dundee person. This is even though it's before Crocodile Dundee.
Right. Yeah.
He becomes Laughing Jack Cockney, a pirate. He becomes Guy Dandy, a tuxedoed high-class gentleman. And Auntie Nelda, who of course we see a lot of later, in basically just full-formed Auntie Nelda form.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she looks a little different than she will later. I don't think she had like the neck brace.
Maybe not
and everything, but for the most part,
the voice is the same. The characterization is
and the look is mostly there. But I will say, obviously, Auntie Nelda is the strongest character there because I mean, Auntie Nelda had apparently also appeared in some of the commercials.
Yes, I believe that's right.
So, and honestly, I think next I liked Guy Dandy. I mean, if we're not counting the dump, I think the dump Alex was probably my next favorite, just because it was so out of the box. This monster looking thing, and he's just like, "Hey, how you doing, Lance?" But probably next was Guy Dandy because he was that kind of rich, sophisticated, that thing. He's done that character before in some other films.
And it's
so that one was fun.
Jim, that voice. I also, quite frankly, I liked that his cane fired lasers. I liked that it was a weaponized cane.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I will say that character probably got the least amount of attention because his segment was so short.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy what little we got. Honestly, both Rudd Hardtack and Jack O'Cockney, and we do see a Rudd Hardtack like character in some of the later films. We see him doing that Australian again. I don't know if we get the pirate back. The pirate was probably my least favorite.
Pirate was easily my least favorite of them. Yeah, he also, and again, I think this is a credit to how they've improved over Family Album.
Right,
they didn't give him much time. Like he's just sort of in and out of the film. They spend more time with Alex, the dump, than I think they do with Jack the Pirate.
Yeah, and I mean, I was curious because the pirate had a very patchy beard. And I was like, is this like a makeup choice? Is Jim Varney like me and just can't grow full facial hair? Like, or, was this, because I was like, it's a little distracting. I'm not sure what the choice on there is, but also
that could just be it's a low budget film and they don't have a makeup person.
Right. I think that might have played into it as well. But I will say it was my least favorite character because it went a little too authentically pirate. Because they had like a woman tied up and it seemed very like kidnappy, rapey, pillage type of setup there, and I'm just like, ooh, how close are we getting to authentic pirate? Because I don't think we need to get too close. This is supposed to be a fun movie here. And Rudd Hardtack just didn't mean anything to me, really.
No, frankly, my favorite part of Rudd Hardtack was just a visual gag, which was that which they didn't do anything with after they introduced it. Was as they show up, the sign introduces the location as Rudd Hardtack's mercenary training camp, apparently for children.
Yes, that was. I love the mercenary training camp for children. Yeah. That was great. I think the other thing I liked about Rudd Hardtack is, again, Rhonda Sue does that bit because for some reason Rudd Hardtack has this thing where he can't remember certain words. Mm-hmm. So she finishes all of his sentences and her delivery is so just like she's just over it. It's like she is a teenager that took a summer job.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is Dr. Otto's like package, his benefits package? Like why is she here?
Yep.
Because I loved that character though. I thought it was great.
So I like that bit. My biggest complaint about it would have been that too many of the words she inserted was just the word ruddy.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say, but sorry, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, what I was going to say is, but I specifically liked the way that the joke played each time, which was that if he paused for just a second, she would insert the word, and he never repeated it. He just continued on with the sentence. It was always just one word, and he just flowed right on from what.
As if he had said it. Yeah.
Exactly as if he had said it.
That gag was great. I will say the one that annoyed me simply because I'm like, that actually doesn't apply, is she kept calling Lance a communist. I was like, no. He is like the epitome of like what's wrong with capitalism. Yeah. So you want to call him a fascist? Sure, go for it. But he's not a commie. Not a communist. And I think they might have gone with commie because it was the 80s. We were in, Cold War with Russia. Maybe that was the tack. But I'm just like, if you know anything about communism, he's the opposite.
Well, also that, but I mean, they're also playing Rudd Hardtack again. He's running a mercenary camp for children. Like he is going to be far fascist right himself.
But just referring to Lance as a communist, I'm like, you're not paying attention.
Lance is arguably to the left of Rudd Hardtack. So
Possibly.
Yes.
Um,
Illustrates his extreme, how extreme he is.
But yeah,
I have here.
yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, was there anything else about the film that you specifically wanted to mention?
Let's see.
'Cause I think we've talked about a lot of the broad.
We talked about a lot of it.
strokes.
We
Yeah.
mentioned some of the flashbacks, you know, the flashback to when they were born, Lance, Dr. Otto, when the Christmas, when Dr. Otto kills his parents, the science. I
Right.
alluded to the science fair earlier, which is where we're
Right.
to the robot.
Yes.
And where Lance has
great.
his Lance, I think might even
Voting
win.
booth.
Yeah, he has it. He has his science fair project is called Our Most Sacred Right, which is where there is simply his science fair project is simply a voting booth that you can
Yeah.
step into and simulate voting. Some of the other science fair
Yeah, and
projects.
I would probably argue that Lance would probably only let certain people walk in there.
I just like that there's absolutely nothing scientific about this project at all.
No.
It's just
half of those projects were not science projects. If you looked around the room, half of those were not science projects.
The other ones all sound like they're all well, they're opinions, but they're opinions in sort of bad science fair thinking.
Sure.
But so I wrote down some of these, by the way.
Yeah.
They some of the ones in some of the other competitors in the science fair are bats are smart too. Wheels, big and small.
Yeah.
Pork through the ages.
That I loved that one. That one was great. Yeah.
Why men are smarter.
Yeah.
And rocks I have known.
Yeah.
That one barely shows up on screen too. Basically, the
Yeah.
robot is it right as you see the screen.
Yeah. No, that was really good.
And a few of those don't get much screen time. They're just background visual jokes for just how terrible all the projects this fair are.
Yeah.
Let's see. I liked the bit. One of the more random bits, to be honest, in the film is when they're with the pirates and the pirates threaten them, and then there's I forget how it's set up exactly. They're told that they could win a cabana freezer, and it turns into a game show for just like 15 seconds.
Yeah, for like literally like 10 to 15 seconds. Like it's,
So I like the randomness of this film. That was one that feels like it's out of a different type of comedy. That's an airplane joke.
Yeah.
That is straight up like a non sequitur airplane Family Guy type joke. And this can do a lot of different humor, but that's not it. And especially not the one and only time it does it in this film.
Yeah. I was gonna say if they had done that kind of, random, cut to something completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
Throughout the film, I think it would have felt more organic. But yeah.
But when Doris questions whether it's a good idea to go forward with this, after the freezer pitch, I liked the line, which was Doris, the side-by-side freezer, we'd be fools not to try. Let's see. I like the bit. One of the things I thought was odd early on in the film, it was a sign of how low budget the film was, is that the first time we see the Cincinnati bankers, it makes sense. The second time we see them is them hiring Lance Sterling, which makes less sense. That Lance is apparently an agent of the Cincinnati Bank.
Yeah. I mean, he does continue the joke of, there's nothing more important than Cincinnati when it comes to the economy.
And the use of it would make more sense if you're just going to have them be the representation of authority. Except for later in the film, we literally see the U.S. president. In what is frankly a funny little bit where he's cowering, and when his aides inform the president,
go ahead.
Yeah, the aides inform the president that Dr. Otto's plan has completely wrecked all the record keeping of America's monetary. What the money that we owe and the money that we're owed.
Yeah.
And the president
he's like, so effectively, we have no national debt.
He erased our national debt.
Cool.
All right,
let's announce it. he's gonna take credit for it. Which is great. Yes. Yeah, I will say one of my favorite gags in this whole film. Okay. Is when they are basically showing how everything is like falling apart and everything's dropping. and there are a couple of different bits of them throwing like newspapers with headlines, and one of them shows the dollar collapses, the pound collapses, and then France announced today the franc collapses, and then this guy just falls, and they're like, "Oh no, Frank!" that just killed me.
Yep.
Oh.
It wasn't a joke exactly. I thought it was weird when they had tied up the Tina Nelson from White Plains, one of the henchwomen.
Right. Yeah.
On the cliff. I thought it was very weird when frankly one of my complaints, overly long chase to get up the hill from
that
Doris.
whole sequence was
that was
too
the
long.
worst timed bit in the entire movie. That lasted twice as long.
I did love though the fact that the threat to her life was a box full of chickens pecking at the string, holding up this. Like that's.
I like the chicken-based thing. I like the fact that Lance implicitly ate the chickens after the scene was over.
Well, it looks and he goes, "Oh, look, lunch!" And then they just show the chickens. I'm like,
and then he mentions as they're walking away that he ate
that was good chicken. But yeah, I was like, wow, okay.
It wasn't a joke exactly. I thought it was weird when Lance found the grappling hook at apparently a dead skeleton, like the remains of a dead person at the bottom of the.
I do like that he threw the grappling hook onto the one thing holding up the woman he's trying to save.
Oh, yeah.
And it actually causes her to get closer to falling.
Yes.
I was like, okay, that's sufficiently selfish of Lance. I believe that.
Yes. I was like, this going back to my point about Doris. It's one of the moments where, like, when she actually is the one who saves Tina Nelson from White Plains.
Yeah,
I wish we got more of a shot that. Yeah, it's not him. He's taking credit for it. But
yeah, and of course Lance takes credit. Yeah.
But I mean, through the entire scene, he's going to take credit.
Oh,
and she's going to do it. But it's one of the missed opportunities that we just don't get her. Frustration over the lack of appreciation she gets.
I will say, because it's around this point that we get to the Auntie Nelda segment.
Yes, it is.
And I specifically wrote down because there is a bit where it's made obvious that Auntie Nelda has drugged the wine. But before that, they all took a drink of the wine and put it down. And there's a bit where Lance looks down at the table and goes, "Doris, you embarrass me," and wipes something. And I'm like, are we supposed to understand that this is wine that she spit out? Or did they show specifically that she didn't drink wine? That whole... I feel like there was supposed to be something there to make something obvious to us that I think was missing. Because I was like, I did not get that we implicitly understood. I get that the characters understand that, but I, as the audience, missed that Doris specifically didn't drink the wine. It looked to me in the scene where everyone else did that she did too.
Yep. Yeah. No, I don't have an answer for you there, I'm afraid. Yeah. Looking back at my notes, I like the randomness of the transporter shroud. It's just like, we need these characters out. That they're teleported out with a blanket.
Yeah, that was great. That was well done.
A recurring thing throughout the film. This isn't specific to one scene, but I noted during the climbing scene when Lance is climbing up to save the woman from the falling door.
Right.
There's music that plays under that. I like the music in this film. The music there.
There's no composer listed, so
there's
I don't.
IMDb. His name is Shane Keister.
Okay.
Who it says I think also worked on Ernest Goes to Camp.
That would make sense.
But,
I mean, I'm sure if we keep an eye out, we'll see a lot of these people.
A lot of the recurring characters
come back. Like I said, specifically, I know that Jackie Welch does.
Mike Mueller does.
Mike Mueller does in much smaller roles.
In smaller roles.
Yes.
Let me note something real quick here too.
And I think Esther Houston also comes back. Esther Houston was Tina from White Plains.
I'll make a sad addendum here, something I discovered, because I
Oh.
wondered. It's well, yeah. I mean, I wondered because Mike Mueller had been obviously the lead here, then had a couple of small roles.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In the other films. And so I look in his IMDb page mentioned he'd passed away in '91.
Yeah,
When he
which was and
Yes.
right after Ernest Scared Stupid,
it was
because he
right around
does
the time
appear
yeah.
in Ernest
He has
Scared
a small
Stupid.
role in Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah.
I was curious if I could find his obituary, and I did.
Mm.
He was killed. He was driving his pickup apparently to an audition for Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh,
To
man.
be one of the actors who
Yeah,
reenact
in the
scene.
reenactments. Yeah.
Reenactments, yeah. Apparently had gotten his hair cut and everything for it, according to his wife, and he was hit by a train. Apparently there was a train crossing on private property. There wasn't a light or a warning or anything. He might have been wearing headphones or something at the time. For anyone listening, it's against the law to wear headphones when you're driving to play music. But yeah, he didn't see a train coming, and it just it hit his car, and he wasn't any that's why his career ends there with Ernest Scared Stupid, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I will say Daniel Butler, the guy who plays Willie the robot,
Yeah.
is also in some future films. Specifically, he's in Ernest Goes to Camp. He's Eddie, basically not Bobby in that movie.
Yeah. Yes.
He's the stand-in for that would normally be with I think they changed his characters' names, but what was it? Gallard Sartain? Can't remember how that man's name
I don't
is.
remember. Yeah.
But yeah, basically the I mean, we'll talk about it in the next episode, actually. But he's the assistant to the chef in that film.
Yeah. To go back to what I was saying a second ago, the music at different points in the film, like it's not gonna get nominated for any awards, but like it was better than I expected for, again, a sub $1 billion independent feature. And a lot of times it was I thought it played well to the comedy of the film.
Sure.
Because that they were sort of the audio version of Playing Against Type, like where they're having a chase scene with Guy Dandy, and it's kind of almost like a big band type number, it's like a fake Sinatra number called what was it called? Meet Me at the Rainbow Grill, that's playing underneath the chase scene, which was impressively catchy at places. The opening music that plays under the titles too, I cared for less, to be frankly, but it still sounded to me like the theme song from like a 1980s USA TV show.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, just a nice, basically better than I would have expected for a film of this type.
Sure. Yeah, I think it worked well for the tone. Absolutely.
But incidentally, according to Justin Lloyd's book, production on the film took about 5 months. Strikes me as maybe folks were working on and off on it, but that's a long shoot for a film of this type.
I mean,
92 minutes
you
long.
have to imagine that they might have had to be taking, because Carton and Cherry are still running an ad agency. Yeah. So I don't know how, and I mean, I do wonder how much they had to break when filming some of the later films as well. Because especially at this point, they're not a film company specifically.
No.
So obviously some of the later films would be successful enough to at least bankroll future films. But yeah. So I wonder if perhaps they were having to take breaks, just schedule wise.
Let's see.
I was gonna say, was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Sure. A couple of things I discovered, again, from the book. One of the things Justin Lloyd mentions in the book is that they were going for a certain kind of Monty Python humor, which I'm not sure the best analogy, but it's close enough to
Right.
it. And that they gave the film a different working different title over in the European market. I don't actually know if the film got released in the European market or not, but they gave it a title,
Right.
and a poster made for it, and the poster used to hang in Jim Varney's kitchen up until he passed. And Justin shared this poster. If I can share this here,
Yeah.
in our little Zoom chat. The name of the film in the European market was not Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam. It was Never Get Poop on Your Shoes.
Which is just so random.
It's one of the lines Dr. Otto says in the film about Lance Sterling.
Yeah.
I don't remember the context.
It's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and since we haven't shared it before, this for everyone is the titular Dr. Otto.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can see, a bit of his costume, just I will say here you can tell it does kind of look like they put football pads on him, but then put this like metallic, stringish looking stuff all around it as well to give it a real look.
Yeah. I still think Ming the Merciless is the best, on point comparison for him.
Yeah.
I couldn't find any numbers. I mentioned earlier the reviews were mostly negative when it hit theaters. I honestly couldn't find any numbers for what the box office was. Box Office Mojo has nothing on this film.
Right.
But I did, out of curiosity, then look up to see what was in theaters around the same time, to see like what was this competing with, because this came out July 19th, 1985. In the weeks before that, and thus, because again, films ran longer back in 85. Back to the Future had opened like 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
Explorers, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome had opened just the week before. National Lampoon's European Vacation, Black Cauldron opened the week after. Weird Science, Fright Night, Follow That Bird opened a couple weeks later, and possibly most similar to this type of comedy in the sense that, and I'm certain, given how this was doing, Dr. Otto was not still in theaters by the time August 9th rolled around. No. It's 85. I don't know how long they would allow it to run.
Right.
But about 3 weeks later was when Pee-wee's Big Adventure opened. And given that it's a road trip with costumes and comedy and stuff like that is not far off from what this film is trying to do, I think.
Right. I mean, I would imagine with no concrete box office numbers attached to it, it probably, as you said, it really only ran in a local market, which is probably why there are no box office, because it wasn't national. But I doubt even in the local market it would have gotten longer than a month.
Exactly. I think you're right.
Probably a week or two.
You also didn't have like megaplexes back in the 85 as often.
Right.
So
you were limited.
5 or 6 theaters. You want to put these other films in.
I was going to say 6 was a big theater at that time. 6 screens was big. But was there anything else that we wanted to discuss specifically?
I don't think I got anything else. Again, for being a low budget film, we haven't mentioned this. I thought the special effects looked, again, charmingly cheesy.
I think that the film being low budget is not what hurt this.
No, it wasn't.
I actually loved the aesthetic that the low budget gave to it. I think the thing that hurt the film the most is that it just didn't completely come together. I don't think it completely knew what it was trying to say, and therefore kind of stumbled in saying it. And I will say, it's an independent film. A lot of some of the acting, like I said, we mentioned some of the acting is actually pretty impressive, especially for the characters that they're trying to portray. Some of it's a little weaker. But again, I don't think that's the biggest issue of the film. I think the biggest issue is that it's just a little unsettled, doesn't really completely come together.
It's a little scattershot.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I think
yeah.
if it had been tightened up a little more, I think I still think it would work as a midnight film. You know, a little
Yeah,
less.
honestly, I'm
But
surprised that there isn't a little bit more of a
yeah,
cult
yeah.
around this.
People show up, yell their favorite lines, dress up like
Yeah.
animals, all this stuff like that.
Yeah. You know,
But
Dr. Otto cosplay should be a
yeah,
thing. My
yes.
goodness. Could you imagine being the guy who's the head hand for the
Yes.
guy cosplaying the whole
Yes.
day? You just like, back behind a shroud, just like
I halfway now want to do Dr. Otto for Dragon Con next year. Just
oh, who are you gonna get to be your head hand though,
I don't.
Lauren?
Yeah, exactly.
Not me.
Not you. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I'll audition for.
Yeah, I was about to say if it was just like bits on a film or something like that, the hand acting that would be fun. But
Yeah.
walking around all day, no,
No,
thank
no,
you.
no, no.
No,
But no,
thank
I think part of the reason I think this works as sort of a midnight type film is
yeah,
it's not great, but it has a lot of charm
yes,
for what it's trying to do. Some of the stuff, as we've mentioned, on a bit by bit level does work. Because after all, I've and you've seen plenty of other independent, quote unquote bad films of this sort of type that don't work
Yeah.
like in any respect. And this one at least succeeds on some levels.
yeah.
Well,
And it destroys capitalism. So how much bad can you say about it?
I wish I could identify the car he's driving, to be honest. I'm terrible with IDing cars, but Lance
yeah,
drives this such a massive, convertible.
long white thing,
Yeah.
and I think at a certain point there was something on the back of it that got knocked off.
Is that what it was? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It is such a it's again once again a great gag at the end when Lance is in like running the steering wheel and the women are having to push the car like from place to place.
Again, insufferable ass, that man. All right. So then I think it is time for a couple of segments. First, I think we are gonna start with the moment. This is the moment in the film that was either your favorite or just the most interesting in your opinion. So Lauren, I am going to let you go first. What was your moment?
My favorite bit in the film, what would that probably be? I like the guy dandy chase scene to a certain extent. I thought it was visually well done. I thought the Auntie Nelda restaurant scene was well done. I mentioned the science fair earlier. Frankly, if I have to pick out one thing, I'm probably gonna go with the science fair.
I was about to say the way you were talking about it, I feel like it's the science fair for you.
No, I like the science fair was all played so firmly tongue in cheek.
Yeah, there were some great gags in there. Yeah, there was some good stuff. I mean, my first thought was to give it to some Dr. Otto scene, but I couldn't think of a specific one. And when I think about it, honestly, my favorite moment in the whole film is the Frank collapses. Oh no, Frank! It's just that joke. I just loved that joke. And it is a silly joke. Yeah. But the way that it was done, I just loved it. It was so funny. And it's not just it's a visual gag as well as a verbal joke. So yeah, I thought that was that is my ew moment.
Nice. All
right. So now it is time to give out our Nelby awards. So these are, of course, awards for our favorite or most interesting character. So again, Lauren, I'm going to let you start first.
I think it has to be Dr. Otto. I really don't think for this film. I mean, I can hear arguments for other ones, but Dr. Otto's, he's compelling, enough
Sure.
as a character here. He's about as fully formed as this sort of comedic villain can be.
Sure.
I'll simply mention this too. Is it just as an aside? Is something I liked at the beginning of the film? Is it just jumped right into Dr. Otto and his plan? Like this
Yeah.
film did not waste 15 minutes.
After the Ernest introduction, yeah.
Yes.
If you saw it, which I
Yes.
did, but yeah, after the Ernest introduction, yeah, jumped right into that. And yeah, I mean, again, for the first like 15 minutes of this film, I was like, why don't more people talk about this film?
Yeah.
This film is so much fun.
Yeah.
It's great. And then I started to see, oh yeah, it kind of falls apart when Dr. Otto's not on screen, doesn't it?
A little bit,
A
yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. They justify the other characters. Jim has fun with them, but the script doesn't do a great job of justifying their presence at the length of time they're there.
Sure. Okay, so for me, I kind of made an unofficial rule for myself. Obviously, this does not apply to you, but I kind of made an unofficial rule in these, is that I wasn't able, because the whole podcast is about Ernest and Jim Varney, so I disallowed myself from because if he's eligible, of course he's going to win. He's probably going to win every time if I make him eligible, which is why I chose that he could not be eligible, because yes, he is absolutely the hero of this film, the best part of it, hands down. And I will say, as an honorable mention, I will throw Glenn Patak as his head hand, because that man is doing some work that isn't fully recognized. And I just got to say, it's hard enough being an actor that has to be attached to another actor, but then to throw a hand performance in on top of it, I think that's great. But I am actually going to give my Neldy to Tina Getz, I believe, who played Rhonda Sue, because I loved her look. I loved her attitude. This, like I said, seems like some person that just saw a listing for a summer job and is just like, sure, I'll be an evil henchman, whatever. And just that attitude mixed with this, evil layer situation and her costume and everything. I love that choice. I love that decision. I think that is great, and it makes me want to know more about this character. So yes, my Neldy award has to go to Tina Getz as Rhonda Sue.
Nice.
All right, so now, Lauren, it is time to answer the most important question. The biggest question on this podcast, the question, of course, that Ernest himself asked for years. So, Lauren, do you or do you not know what he means, Vern, in specific about this film?
I think I know what he was trying to get at. I don't think. I think he makes it more than halfway there. But doesn't quite nail it. So yeah. I know what he means.
Just not sure it was successful.
Yeah, just not.
Yeah, I will have to say, in reference to the question, kinda. Because like I said, there's a lot of things about this film that I do really like and I do enjoy. But I just, as a whole, I think it's a mess. And I don't think it completely comes together. But I think that as a first film for this group, for, Varney as a lead actor, and for, John Cherry as a director, first, was this his first feature?
Probably, yeah. He pretty much just directed Ernest films.
Yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, considering that, I mean, he did direct Family Album, but you know,
Yeah.
that was still kind of a series of vignettes.
That's just sketches. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, I think that this is a decent first outing.
Yep.
Again, I'm not gonna give it a ton of credit as a film, but I think it's a good start.
Yep.
And I think seeing this, I'm surprised where it goes from here.
Yeah.
So I think that this is, you know, this is actually pretty decent beginning. But with that being said, want to go ahead. Obviously, we are on Patreon if you are listening to this. So you know about the Patreon, patreon.com/theflyingcow. Make sure, I will say, if you are listening to the audio of this, we do have the video available on the $15 tier, the hovering cow tier. You can check out the video there. And if somehow you got a hold of this episode and you're not a patron, please become a patron, because I don't know how you're doing this otherwise. But do want to remind everyone to check out the rest of our stuff. Remember, you can always contact me at the Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. The Flying Cow Pod at gmail.com is also our email address. There's the Facebook group, all sorts of different ways that you can interact. And if you're not already, check out all of the podcasts that we have. Lauren, anything that you wanted to plug before we go out?
Not much, not any productions or anything coming up right now. If anyone wants to find me on Twitter, for instance, I'm at Lauren Collins, Loren Collins. And you can find me with similar names on your other social media. But I'm less active on the other ones. So
sure. All right. Well, thanks again, Lauren, and thanks to all of those listening and watching. Really looking forward to continuing this project. I'm really enjoying this so far. We got a lot, for us, we got a lot of interest on Twitter for this project specifically. So if you are here specifically checking this out, I hope that you will give us feedback. Let us know how you are enjoying the podcast. Obviously, on the next episode, we will be reviewing Ernest Goes to Camp, the first Ernest feature film. So be sure to check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, moo. Know what I mean?